So Ed, do you want to kick it off or do you want me to get started?
No, I'll go ahead and say a few things. I'd like to introduce the officers. We have Chris, the newest one is Matt Brandis, who's the program chair for this next year. And I see that you've arranged for this meeting, so I thank you very much. And John, welcome. We really appreciate your time to come in and teach us some things on this. Jolie, anything for the scholarship?
We're starting the interview process tomorrow. I have 2 scheduled to interview and hope to have all of them interviewed before the end of the year. So,
Okay. Cecil around?
Cecil's
Yeah,
here.
I'm here. I don't really have anything for the library right now, but
Okay.
we'll
I
have.
just want to remind everybody that this month and next month for sure is Zoom. And yet at the end of January on the 29th is that first Beekeepers class. And I recommend that everybody attend that. Okay. Is Janet Campbell on? I don't see her. Okay. Robert Burns.
He's on a cruise.
Okay. Jolie, we got Andy Noachek. Are you on?
I do not see Andy on.
Okay. Cheryl Burkhead, our editor.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. You got any words of wisdom for us?
No, I'm down in. So I was frantically looking for my button on my phone because I'm not used to listening on my phone. No, if anybody is not getting the newsletter that is a member, please get with myself or Robert. And there's a lot of people whose membership expires the end of this year, so make sure you get online and get your dues paid to continue getting our newsletter and all the great content.
Good point. Thank you. Becky Tipton.
Yes, I am here. So
All right.
the new Beekeeper class committee has met a couple of times. We've got a very healthy start on this, getting ready, got the program set. I think it was in last month's buzzer, so anybody can check that out. If anybody would like to help advertise for this class, because our advertising budget is very, very small, I would happily send you a flyer to print and put up. Kind of has a little tear off tabs so that you can put it up in the feed store and people can join us. We're looking to meet in person. We hope that that is successful. We're going to meet in Building 21. We have 2 vendors lined up to come. So full day worth of fun, and for the mere sum of $35. So anyone that is a year or 2 into beekeeping would probably appreciate that class. The next class, year 2 and beyond, is for probably anyone who's in beekeeping less than about 5 years. I think that they have content that would be really meaningful to what you're doing in beekeeping. Bring a bee buddy, come and join us. I think it'll be a real good time. So thanks for asking, Ed, and we'll see you guys in person the end of January.
Yeah. Now, did that go out with a newsletter? Because I got a copy of that bulletin that you have, and I put it up like at church and sent it out to 1 or 2 other groups.
Cool.
And,
Yeah.
So if you start getting people from Missouri, you'll understand why.
Yeah, that's you know what, we get people from Iowa, Missouri, Nebraska. Our classes, it really pulls in a lot of people because it tends to be a fantastic class. We're all of our speakers in our beginner class are members of our Northeast group, people with lots of years of beekeeping experience. The year 2 and beyond class, we have 2 guests coming in from the Northeast area, but they're not necessarily Northeast Kansas members. So people who know what beekeeping is supposed to be like in our part of the world.
Joe Pat, you have any words of wisdom? A thumbs up, huh? Thank you. And I thank you for your service for this last year. I appreciate your help. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Matthew.
Hey, Jolie, do you want to go ahead and introduce the youth scholarship? We'll do the youth scholarship and then we'll get over to John.
Let me
I
interrupt. I forgot one new member, and that's Jay Francis. I should have introduced him.
Yeah.
And he's
Can
taking
everyone
over
hear me
Fun Day.
okay?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah. Okay, great. I want to talk about Fun Day, and we're encouraging people to save the day. It's June 4th. Knowledgeable speakers. And we have Andy Evans from the American Heat Journal and Kristen from Purdue University. With commitments with other speakers, it's most likely to be a strong showing in the University of Nebraska. We will have many topics and sessions.
Jay, unfortunately,
all day.
your feed is weak, and it's very hard to understand what you're saying.
Okay, let me move for a second, skip this out.
Okay, thank you.
Is this better?
Yes,
Can you hear me better?
yes.
Okay, I have a very, very bad connection here. Okay, so we wanted to mention that we have Jay Evans from the American Beekeeping Journal and Crispin Given from Purdue University. They will be speaking at Fun Days. And we are working on commitments from other speakers, and it's most likely University of Nebraska will have a strong showing. We will have many bee topics and sessions that you can sit in all day. Hive demonstrations, ice cream, snacks, vendors, door prizes, and lunch provided. And go to the NEKBA website and make sure you update your membership for 2022 and sign up for Fun Day. I also wanted we are looking for volunteers to help out on Fun Day. It takes a lot of people to make Fun Day happen. Please reach out to me, Jay Francis, or other officers. My email and cell number are on the back of the buzzer. So we are working to make Fun Day happen.
Okay, Jolie, I guess you're up again.
Okay, well, before I start, I want to put a plug in for the third Thursday program coming up this Thursday. And it's just some holiday quickies. Becky's going to do cranberry butter and how to make some Santa hats. Joe Patrick's going to do pine cone fire starters. Christy's going to do cinnamon infused honey using cinnamon sticks and pecan honey. I'm going to do a little thing on gift bags. And then I just really thought we would do just kind of a brainstorming, and people will be able to share some other ideas that they might have. And that's something we haven't done before. If anyone has done the beeswax cappings and vodka and would want to talk about it for a few minutes, if you'll text me or email me, that would be great. Or just pop on and tell me you'll do it, or put it in the chat box. So anyway, so it is my pleasure to introduce the Morgan family and Grace and her sister Annabelle. Grace actually got the scholarship, but then they had the benefit of a mentor for all year. And their mentor was Miles Raymond. Miles has done a great job, and we really appreciate it. And this is, again, what we really like to see. We want to see whole families get involved. And their dad was really involved, and both girls were involved. So anyway, you guys take it away. We really appreciate your being part of the program. So
Let's see if I can do this right.
name's Annabelle.
And I'm Grace, and these are our first beehives.
How to get bees. Buy a package, one of our hives, approximately 5 pounds of bees, by 5,000 in a screen box with a caged queen, and a can of sugar water. Go to Nuke, our second hive. Short for nucleus colony, a box with 5 frames of bees and a laying queen. Acquire established colony, which we did not do. Swarm, catch a colony in the wild and a pre-owned one.
And this is a photo of us getting our first package of bees. Learning about bees. NEKBA, Northeast Kansas Beekeepers Association. In the picture, this is our beekeeper mentor, Miles Raymond, with our 2 hives, Honeycat, which is the nuke, and Waxy Mama, which is the package. We learned from other beekeepers and magazines like Bee Culture and American Bee Journal. We also checked out books and did internet research. Constructing and locating our hives. We checked to make sure it was legal before we built the hives. We told our neighbors what we were doing. Using a nail gun and staple gun was very helpful. We put wood glue on the edges to make it last longer. We painted the outside only using light colors like pink and green, but mostly white. The best location is an area that gets the most sun. The entrance should face south or east. In one picture, it's of us building our hives, and the other is us where we put the hive.
Installing our first package of bees. Get the package of bees. Take the package where your hive is located. Remove the can of sugar water. Quickly take out the queen box, then return the can back to the package. Place the queen box between 2 frames, then push the frames together. Make sure you take out one of the frames for now. Shake. When the queen box is secure, again, remove the can of sugar water and dump the bees into the hive while shaking the box. Release. 4 days later, return to release the queen carefully into the hive.
Set them up for success. Feed them a 1-to-1 ratio, 4 pounds of sugar dissolved in 2 quarts of water. We treated for mites. We made sure our queen was laying, and we tried to mark the queen, but we failed the first time. In the top left corner is me making the sugar water, and the one next to it is me pouring it into the feeder. And then the bottom left corner is us treating for varroa mites, and the next picture is us checking and looking for the queen. Success. The workers are building and the queen is laying. We circled an egg so you could see it, and then we looked at all the bees and the comb they're making.
Summer at Marion Market. Miles, our mentor, invited us to share his booth for a Saturday. We made packages of honey butter to sell and help him sell his honey. We also talked to people about beekeeping and showed them our tools and pictures of how we did it.
Invasion of small hive beetles. The square black beetle barns have diatomaceous earth around a cotton ball soaked in apple cider vinegar, and there are about 10 dead small hive beetles in the trap. 2 oil traps have side compartments with cooking oil and center compartment with apple cider vinegar. There are at least 70 small hive beetles that drowned in the oil. We added a guardian entrance reducers that let the bees in and out, but the small hive beetles fall through these holes.
Getting ready for winter. We checked honey supplies. We did the final mite treatment, oxalic acid dribble. Before and after treatment, feeding thick sugar water, 2-to-1 ratio. We put up one breaks to the north, which are hay bales, and entrance reducers on the hives. Extracting honey. We used a knife and a hot knife to scrape off the cappings. Then if there was some left over or it was too low down, we used a capping scratcher, which has little needles on the end, and you just pull up the little cappings. We loaded the frames into the extractor. Then we added a filter into the bucket so we get rid of all of the chunks. Pro tip, don't forget to plug in your hot knife.
Are there any questions?
Good job. So how long did it take you to figure out you left your knife unplugged?
Almost the whole time.
Oh. How much honey did you harvest?
A half of a bucket of like the tall white ones.
Good. 2.5 gallons. Good. Great job.
Great job, you guys. Again, so the reason they have so many small hive beetle, this is pro tip, is their bees are in full shade. And so we really had a long conversation about they really have to do something about either moving their hives or making a path for sun to hit their hives, because that is so important for success. So good job. You guys were great scholarship students.
Thanks, Miles, for helping us.
Yeah.
You're very welcome. Look forward to helping you next year.
Good job.
And
Yes.
that is one thing we've added to the program is we've extended it at least through the second year for the mentors to help them to, if their hives made it through the winter, but to help them make a nuke or, you know, help them requeen if they need to or whatever they need to do. So I think that's a nice addition to the program. So.
Thanks, Jolie. Yeah, and I think next month we'll have another presentation from somebody else in the youth scholarship program. Is that correct?
Actually, I had 2 that backed out tonight, so I'll spread them over January and February. So
Okay.
they had school programs and stuff
Great.
going on. So might be several next month and several in February. So.
Okay. So our guest speaker tonight is John Benham from Kentucky. I attended the EAS, Eastern Apiculture Society conference back in August earlier this year. It was my first time. It was in Shepherdsville, Kentucky, a small little suburb of Louisville. I have to tell myself a little bit. So John was walking around the conference in coveralls and a ball cap, looking like just the good old country boy that he is. No idea who he was. First time I've ever been to the conference. And an hour later, I was shocked when he walked up on stage and gave a hell of a presentation for the conference. So I immediately knew that I wanted him to come and present to our group and talk to Christy Sanderson about it. And it worked out really well that December and January were going to be Zoom-based meetings. So John, welcome. Thank you very much for coming. You can give an introduction, and you should be a co-host, so you should be able to share whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'm gonna bring my program up here and get it going. And thank you for the kind introduction. Okay, can you see monitoring honeybees in cold weather now?
We can.
Okay. It should be up by itself if I did it right. So.
Yep.
Okay, let me get the gallery view over here.
Although I had to make a comment to one of our other team that if the weather doesn't cool down here, this talk is going to be, we're going to have to remember this for next year.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I was asked to do this a few years ago, and it's basically what we're going to try to do to make sure our bees are surviving the winter and what we can do to help them survive the winter. And let's see here. There we go. One of the facts of beekeeping is that a colony of honeybees, and I think most of your experienced beekeepers know this, will not get over a mite problem and the accompanying induced diseases that will reduce the number of winter bees or emerge out of a state of weakness during the winter dormancy period, no matter how long or short the dormancy duration. And boil that down is your bees don't get better over winter, and you've got to get them healthy in the fall, and that's what it's all about. And they will usually mirror the spring. The colony will mirror the position or the health of the bees that they were in the fall. So if you want to have strong, disease-free and quick building colonies in the spring, you will need to assure that in the fall, that your colonies are a model of the traits that you wish to see in the spring. This is a little thing. I write a monthly news column for bee column actually for the Nashville Area Beekeepers Association. And this is what was in there this month. And right now we're at the end of the bee cycle, and that's in late December. And it's unique that in December, both the end of the bee cycle occurs and the beginning of the bee cycle for next year occurs. So, and it's usually around the winter solstice in December that the queen will start laying a small number of eggs to replace the winter bees that will be dying off little by little come spring. And this is actually the beginning of the spring buildup. And one thing you need to be cautioned about, there's nothing wrong with feeding winter patties and candy boards and things like that, but don't feed brood builder patties too soon. We can induce dysentery, and dysentery will generally induce nosema and other diseases we don't want. It's okay once you start getting ground warmings such as purple dead nettle and things like that appearing in dandelions to start feeding brood builder patties. But what we don't want is a influx of protein into the bees during the winter while they're clustering, when they can't get out and take cleansing flights. And this is what will generally cause dysentery. It backs up in the bee's rectum, and they get to the point where they can't hold it, and they defecate in the hive, and that starts a bad series of events for the bees. Now, cold weather will be around for some time now. Hopefully, it's going to be 70 here Saturday, I think, or a couple of days. And the natural brood buildup will be slow, and it generally has to do with pollen. That's what the babies or the larvae are all fed. That's the protein. They need protein to build and survive, and that's not going to occur for several weeks. And the buildup during this time is dependent on winter bees. If you don't know what winter bees are, there's a lot of information on them. And from what I've seen of this group so far, I'm sure you have a good idea what they're about. And winter bees are the protein source for the bees when the pollen is not available. Some researchers are saying that winter bees are actually the third caste of the bees. The queen and the workers would be the two caste, and the winter bees would be the third caste. And the caste is defined as morphological differences between members of the same sex of a species, and that's honeybees is what we're talking about. Now, the winter bees are necessary for survival, and in the fall, if we don't treat for mites, it's very difficult for winter bees to appear. And once they start help rearing the brood, and the brood that they're going to rear come up here in the end of December is going to be the nurse bees and the foragers in the spring. So it's so important to have them. And they are designed for fat storage, but are poor pollen and nectar foragers. That's the necessity of brood rearing. A brood being reared that will be the correct age to forage when the weather breaks and pollen is available. The current honey stores in the colony will be used at an increasing rate for thermal regulation in the cold weather. And likewise, these is so important. That's why I have it in red. As the weather warms, more stores are used as food for the increasing population of adult bees. Adult bees feed on carbs. The babies, the larvae, the pupa all feed on protein. Now, all beekeepers should be thinking about this while monitoring long-range forecasts for the late winter, early spring, and giving consideration to the food stores that were noted for the colonies in the fall. In other words, we're checking things out in the fall to make sure they're going to have enough food to get through to the spring. Stay well ahead of the food being consumed and the colony buildup. And you can also consider an oxalic acid vaporization this time of year. If you do that, I would not do a drench. We don't want wet bees. Wet bees don't survive very long if it gets cold. But the oxalic acid vaporization works very well. I will probably do that in a couple of weeks once they go into a more of a dormant period. And you don't really want a full dormant tight cluster if you treat with oxalic acid vaporization. We want a loose cluster, maybe even some flying bees. And the oxalic acid vaporization is much more efficient if you treat during that period. And we need to continue to monitor food supplies, lifting and tilting the hive and peeking in if candy or sugar was added earlier in the season. And even though the colony is in a predominantly dormant period, they need to be checked and observed occasionally for the hive security and food supplies. And one thing, because we've got entrance reducers on and mouse guards and things, we need to make sure that dead bees do not block the entrance. The bees are going to try to carry them out. And when they get over to the entrance, if they can't get them out, they'll end up blocking them. So it's a good management practice to go around occasionally and clear out your entrances. And you will find dead bees. Now, next month, we're thinking is mostly the dormant month, and there's not a lot to do. You need to observe bees when they are flying and see how they're acting and see if they're defecating correctly, if there's snow out there. And I've got some photos of this in a minute. But one thing most beekeepers have noticed, when you go in to check on your candy and it's cold outside, you'll generally have some bees up in the top around the candy, and they'll expose their stingers. And when they're doing that, they're actually emitting a pheromone, an alarm, and they're informing their colony mates that you're in there and you're an intrusion. So what I like to do is use a little bit of smoke, not much, maybe 1 or 2 puffs. And what we're trying to do is dissipate the pheromones and stop the bees in the cluster from leaving the cluster to come up and check out the alarm to see what's going on. That's just a stressor that we don't need. And those bees need to be down there insulating and heating. So a puff or 2 will help, and it doesn't hurt anything. But likewise, don't get carried away, because we can go the opposite way and cause a disruption of the cluster. And in February, the brood numbers are going to increase. This is when, late February, I'll feed brood builder patties. Brood builder patties and pollen subs are not equivalent to pollen. Most of the comparisons you see are compared to raw pollen rather than bee bread. And bee bread is just a superfood for bees, and pollen sub does not come close, but it is better than nothing. So if you want to feed pollen patties before there's any large amounts of pollen available, that's fine. I don't overdo it. You need small portions, and you can replace them, because hive beetles are like pollen patties too. And you can really beef up a nice hive beetle population if you're not careful, and they will actually run the bees off for that. So one thing that you can do too, that watch the spring warm up and come north, is monitor the hummingbird migration north. You can get a map online and see that. And watch as they move up from the Louisiana and Florida and that area, because hummingbirds don't carry any body fat to speak of, and they have to feed on their as the blooms occur. So where you see the spottings, and there's some dedicated hummingbird people out there, they'll be putting those up on the map, and you can spot the spring moving north. It's a good indicator, and it's fun to watch. Now, winter temperatures in honeybees, 57 degrees is when the bees begin to cluster. And I need to say these temperatures are ambient temperatures. They're not the body temperatures of the bees. So one thing that coincides with 57 degrees, if you look at this, is honey starts to crystallize. And I'm wondering, I haven't found any data on this, if that's the reasons the bees actually begin to cluster at this temperature, is to create a warm area in there around their food to keep the honey from crystallizing. Now, at 50 degrees, flying becomes difficult and limited. And below 50 degrees, movement is limited and difficult. Now, if the bee's body temperature is 50 degrees, they're going to have trouble flying. But most of the time, you can see them flying between 45 and 50 degrees. And that's because the cluster temperatures are a lot warmer and their body temperatures are warmer. So at 42 degrees, that's when bees become comatose and cannot move and feed, etc. And that's when they'll fall off of the cluster and fall on the bottom board, and generally they'll die. Now, the cluster temp usually remains from outer to inner areas around 46 degrees on the outer to about 80 in the center. Except when they start rearing brood. And when they do start rearing brood, it goes from 46 to about 94 degrees, because that's the optimum temperature for rearing brood. This is just a little quick note on how honeybees heat. They have what they call asynchronous flight muscles, which means they are not attached to the wings. They have a dorsal ventral muscle, which is the center muscle. It's this one right here that goes from the top of the thorax to the bottom. And then they have longitudinal muscles that go from the front to the back. And in the winter, they vibrate these large muscles, and they don't move the wings. The wings move when the thorax is moved up and down and in and out. And they do have a set of small muscles in there that open and fold the wings, but that's all the small muscles do, and they are directly attached to the wings. But one thing neat about this and how bees heat is the thorax is a great dissipator of heat. And that just coincides with them being foragers, and they're flying and expending a lot of energy, and they're able to dissipate the heat through their thorax while they're flying. Likewise, in the cluster, as they vibrate these wing muscles, they create a very large amount of heat, and it dissipates very well into the cells they are in, and then through the cluster, and helps them heat the cluster. Now, common winter problems are moisture. I've got a rendition coming up here. Hives can be sealed too tight with little or no ventilation, and they may be, but this is something you have to play by ear and learn as you experience overwintering of bees. Moisture buildup can be fatal to a cluster colony, and a good analogy is us people. We can put all the clothing on that we want in the wintertime, insulation and whatever, and long underwear, and go outside and handle the temperature fairly well unless we get wet. And once we get wet, the clothes don't do any kind of an insulation, and that's the same with the bees in the cluster. If they get wet, they're going to have a tough time making it through the winter. And nosema is a winter problem should you feed brood builder patties too soon, and dysentery usually brings about nosema. Just about all species of bees have nosema spores in their midgut, and as long as they're healthy, they have a bacterial balance that keeps the nosema spores from spreading. But if they get sick and can't take cleansing flights and defecate in the hive and of course they use prophylaxis to feed each other, they'll pass this around, and then nosema can get started. And once it gets started, it's very difficult to check. And always check your food stores. That should be on your list to make sure that your bees are not going to starve. If you've taken care in the fall, that's normally not going to happen. This is what I'm talking about when we're talking about heating in a colony, and ambient heat comes off of the cluster. This rendition on the left here shows the cluster down here. I've taken the frames out to show how the heat rises, And as warm air tends to cool, it becomes more dense and releases moisture. And what we don't want is that moisture condensing up here on the top, on the inner cover, and dripping back down on the bees. And in a natural situation, the heat will come up to the inner cover and then dissipate outwards, and the moisture will condense out here on the walls and generally not on top of the bees. There's a lot of different methods people use to keep this from the moisture doing this. In a tree cavity, it's natural for this to happen. But some of the research shows that the hole in the inner cover can actually be a detriment if because of the temperature differences, and you can actually get condensation around that hole where the bee escape goes in the inner cover. But most people are going to have some kind of a candy or a food or something like that on, which will absorb any excess moisture, and it helps the bees to survive. This is something we look for, that when bees are taking cleansing flight on the day, you'll see the yellow on the outside. This is dysentery is what this is. They're too weak to fly off and take cleansing flight, so they just climb up. This is the beginning of a bad thing, and we'll need to check on this. But the bad part of this is in the wintertime, it's difficult to do something about this. This shows again what's happening. You can see the snow out here in this cluster of bees. And this colony over here on the right doesn't have a lot of problems, but we see defecation occurring in the snow above this colony, which actually means these bees who are probably sick could actually drift over and bring their disease with them in this colony. And about the only solution to that would be to keep your colonies a little bit further apart, where they, in the wintertime, they don't drift very far or fly very far, usually just a few feet. And if you can keep some distance between your colonies, you can help avoid something like that. Mortality takes place. Surviving bees are able to remove the dead bees. It's important. So if you've got an entrance reducer on, be sure to keep things clean. Other debris should be removed to allow the bees to enter and exit the hive. If you use upper entrances, that's fine, but it's easier for bees to clean out dead bees during the lower entrance. So if you get snow on your lower entrance, even if you do have upper entrances, it's advisable to clean that out. And it takes considerably less energy for bees to remove their dead through a bottom board entrance. And that's true because bees are all about energetic profit. They don't want to spend more energy than the food they use to burn to do that job. And dead bees are always found in and out of the colony and around supplemental foods. And most of the time they're going to be removed as the weather warms. And it's not necessary for the beekeeper to remove them when replacing candy or patties, etc., during the cold weather. But if you want to, that's fine as well. This is a common scene of dead bees at the hive entrance. In the summertime, if the bees remove dead bees, we don't see them very often because they will generally fly them out several feet. But in the wintertime, they're trying to conserve energy and conserve food, so they usually don't take them very far out. And if you have a huge amount there, you could be part of a problem, a disease problem. If you've got robbing screens on, I take them off in the fall and put entrance reducers on instead. Robbing screens are very difficult for bees to clean things out. They promote congestion. And if it's warm enough for bees to fly, even for a few minutes, will restrict them from flying, will result in survival liability. Cleansing flights must be taken. And how do I know if a cluster of bees, of living bees in my hive, how do I know if I have those bees in there and they're alive? Well, there's several ways we can do that. We need to monitor food stores all the time, visually checking added food. If your food's disappearing, then you've got bees in there. Listening with a stethoscope, that's a cheap way to do it, about $10 for a stethoscope. Thermal imaging, I've got a thermal attachment to my camera that helps. I'll show you some photos of that, and observe all outside indications of colony health. That's so important. And look for predator signs, but most of the time in the winter, we don't see that. This is the stethoscope. Walmart has them for about $10. My niece is a physician. I think she paid $400 for hers, and I can't hear any better through hers than I can my $10 one, but I'm not going to argue with her. She spent a lot of money for medical school. So this is the attachment I use. It's called a FLIR 1. Once upon a time, you could buy these for refurbished for about $100. Now they're all gone. People have scarfed those up, and they'll run you about $300. And the bad thing, as far as association wanting to buy one for its group, is you have to have different ones for Android than you do iPhones. And that's an expense. That's a lot of money to spend, but they do work very well. Here's a photo I took of a double deep, and you can see the cluster of bees in the bottom of it. And the FLIR gives you the opportunity to choose different colors to display the heat signature the best that you want to do. And this is good. If I see this in December, I know my bees still have plenty of food above them, and they're still downstairs eating, and they haven't even moved up into the top box yet. This is a nuke. I don't do double deep nukes anymore. I use double deep 10 frames with follower boards now, and my survival rate has picked up. But one thing I've noticed that double deep nukes will do during the winter, and this one started out with 5 frames of food above, is they'll eat that up and move up there fairly quickly. So I always make sure I've got a supplemental food on there. And I do that even for my 10 frames. If they've got 7 or 8 frames of honey going into the winter, I will still put candy or sugar or something on the top up there to make sure. It's kind of a fail safe for me. That's just my nature. This is another image I've taken. These are follower boards that's got these in there. I'll show you what those are in a minute. And one thing I like about this photo on the right, you'll see while I was taking this is a small cluster right here. This is the heat signature that's holding against the inner cover above. And then over here behind it is a large colony, and you can see how big the cluster is in that colony. And over here is a different, and you'll see the outer edge of the cluster is right here, and how much hotter it is on the middle of the cluster. Now, your imaging doesn't project as well if there are several frames away from the outside edge of the boxes. You'll still get a heat signature. But one thing I've noticed when I'm doing this with this thermal imager is that 90% of the times when the bees start moving up in the winter, they move towards the south side of the box. And I'm wondering if that has to do with radiant heat from the sun and the leaves being off the trees. And all my colonies are in full sun anyway, but it's pretty unique how they all face east, and all the bees are always on the south side as we get into the cold part of the winter. This is how I do what I call follower boards. I'm just going to do a couple of frame on this couple of slides. This is the follower board here, and I would have 5 over 5 this way. And I can feed in here. This works so well because you can keep feeding a liquid feed even with the ups and downs of the fall weather. When it gets really cold, if it's super cold, of course, we don't want to be feeding above the bees. We can cause a pressure differential in the feeding jar, and it can drip down on the bees and make them wet, and you're going to kill some bees, maybe even kill the cluster. So I tried this about 4 years ago, and it's worked very, very well. And it stresses the bees less come spring, because normally all I have to do is start feeding them again down here. And as they expand, I just move the follower boards out and add frames of foundation or comb in there. And follower boards are nothing new. They used to use them quite a while ago, but most commercial beekeepers don't use them because they are labor intensive. I don't know if that's a good word or not, but it does take a little extra work. But keeping bees alive takes work, period, anyway. This is what I use. This is a polystyrene foam board. It's single faced. It's faced on the back. That's the top bar. I cut a notch in the top, and then I tape up the entire board to make sure there's no foam exposed. If you do, you know what the bees are going to do. They're going to chew it. And polystyrene has got formaldehyde and other chemicals in it that I don't like, and I don't want my bees messing with it. This is internal feeding with the follower board. You can feed 3 or 4 jars in here. And one surprising thing I noticed is that you can see the bees are all over here, and very rarely will you see any bees in the dead air space, even in the summertime when they're building. And if you do see any over there, usually it's a good sign they've come over there to build comb and you need to add frame or do foundation. And keeping them crowded like this, I think it really increases pheromone production and pheromone spread. And the bees are just, they seem so much more happy, and they're more productive. And they draw comb out like you wouldn't believe. I did last year, I got 135 frames of foundation drawn into comb using these things. Works very well. This is the heat signature of the bees with the follower board. You can see they're already up here under the candy. This is the front of the box. It's a different heat signature, and it may be because there's a frame or so in between them and you can't really see that. And I do notice that the FLIR does different photos between wax foundation and plastic foundation. You get a better rendition with wax foundation than you do plastic. Now, if we're going to feed, we like to do liquid feed above 50 degrees. Below that, we want to use candy or other sugar derivatives. And I think just about all the recipes I've ever seen work. What I try to do is use a recipe. What I use, I put on a paper plate. I like to use a recipe that I can pop the cover, slide it in, and close it back up within a matter of a few seconds and get things done and not stress the bees and get them all excited. That works better for me. But we don't want to feed brown sugar or other sugars that have additives in it. None of these new sugars they're not really sugars, agave and stuff like that. We don't want to feed those to the bees right now. That's not good for them. And observe the weather forecast, and not keeping up with the food stores and hive colony monitoring and being forced to open the hive under extreme conditions is very stressful to the bees and an indicator that the beekeeper needs to change their monitoring programs. There we go. Now, this is something else I use. It's a scale, and you can tilt your boxes to see how much food is in there. You don't really need a scale to do that, but I recommend putting together a full colony, a double deep box with all the equipment on there that's empty, and lift it or tilt it a little bit, just lift the back part of it up to see what it feels like. And then do another one where you've got full drawn comb in it and see what that feels like, and then go around and lift a few that has bees and food in there, especially if you get one that has 7 or 8 frames of food. You'll feel a marked difference in that. And do be careful when you're doing this. I lash the boxes together with a cargo strap or something like that to help them. Because you don't want your boxes to fall apart in January or February or somewhere around there. That's not a very good thing at all. Now, this is something that I heard about a few weeks ago. I attended the overwintering bees indoors conference. It was a 2-day conference. And the commercial beekeepers have gone to this. And there's a company called Hive Tech Solutions that sells individual climate controlled boxes that can house anywhere from 16 to 96 colonies. They run off of 110 is what they do. I've contacted them, haven't got any information back yet about the price. But one thing the commercial beekeepers have noticed, and they're in the Dakotas and some parts of Wyoming and those areas, and they're overwintering bees indoors, sometimes 15 to 20,000 colonies in one building, but they're controlling the climate to the point where they're keeping the temperatures at 45 degrees year round. They are letting the CO2 levels get up to about 8%. And the bees are doing extremely well in this. And the CO2 levels they've discovered, I thought this was really, really interesting. At 8%, some of the colonies were coming out with 0 mites. Of course, they had low mite counts going in, and the others that had mite counts were very low. So that's great news to hear that's coming about, because we do know that if you can knock a mite population down, it takes them a while to recover, 2 to 3 years. And if you ever do try treatment-free beekeeping, you're going to find out that if you don't treat the mites, in 2 or 3 years, their population will build up to a lethal level, sometimes a little longer, sometimes less. But the idea that they can get the CO2 level to reduce the mite population is going to help us when it comes to capturing drones and producing drones without raising the mite levels in order to do genetic diversity and create genetic vigor in our honeybees, which I think is important. This is really interesting, and you can go to the APHIS M website, and they have this entire conference on there. It's about 5 hours, but it's very, very interesting what was on there. Now, in spite of a beekeeper's best effort with lots of food, ventilation, populous colonies, etc., it is very common to lose bees during the winter season, with as much as 50% losses in some parts of the country. And I think those 50% losses have a lot to do with the beekeepers, and especially what I call hoping or wishing the bees through the winter, because they're not going to get stronger. And if you do your mite counts and do your treatments, your losses are going to drop. I guarantee it. And make sure they've got food, because bees can handle a lot of things. But the mite problem is there, and it is very detrimental to winter bees. And if we don't handle that, the bees are going to have a big, big problem making it through the winter. And that's when you're going to get these heavy losses. Last year, knock on wood, I hope it doesn't, I hope it happens this year. I overwintered 33 and I lost 1. And that was my fault. I really remember what I did to those bees, and I shouldn't have. But what happened is I was treating them for mites, and they avoided the treatment. They would move from one box to the other, up and down, and not go back to the other box where the strips were. And it never occurred to me just to reduce them down to one box and put the strips in there. But anyway, they didn't survive, and that's my management practice. That was bad. Now, if you want any part of this, or you've got questions and you want any part or the entire program, I've got my information coming up here. If you'll email me, I'll be happy to send that to you. And if you ever got any questions or you just want to talk about bees, my cell phone is listed on there, and I'll be happy to talk with you. And maybe I can get my staff to help me. They're the ones that helped me put this program together. They're very interested in bees. You can tell by the way they're paying attention to my laptop there. And if you've got questions, please ask them. It's very important to ask questions. And here's my information. And I do want to thank all you folks for inviting me. I went to your website. You've got a great group. You're a boon to bees, and it's been a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. I have a question. Can you put on feed too early? This was a topic. I mean,
yes, you can. Let me get rid of this show here.
Okay.
Yeah, you can do that. What happens is you'll induce the bees to move up into the top box if you're not careful.
Yeah, that was my concern as well.
And that's not what you want to do, you know.
Ed Darlington put in the chat, are you aware of any data on the CO2 and its effect on mites?
Yes, that was in the conference, and they said at 8%, of course, you know, we can't survive at 8%. Well, we can survive, but we'll sleep a lot at 8% CO2. And what it did, this was a bonus, and they really didn't expect this, that some of the colonies that came out of storage, and that when they took them to almonds, they did mite counts, and some of the colonies actually had 0 mites, which was amazing to me.
Yeah, Ed, maybe we'll do some digging and see if we can't find some studies on that.
Yeah, that conference is going to be, it's on YouTube too, I believe, if you want to go to YouTube. And but it was the Indoor Storage Conference by APIS-M. And I may, let me see here. Yeah, if you'll go and Indoor Storage Conference recording, if you'll go to the APIS-M website and enter that in the search, you can get the entire conference. And it has Jason Miller, the son of John Miller. John Miller used to have 80,000 plus hives. Jason is his grandson. They have some good guys on there, some big time beekeepers.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions for John about wintering? You unmute yourself, ask away.
I would just like to thank John. I got a lot of information out of this, and I find it intriguing about the effect of CO2 on the mites. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. And yeah, that's intriguing to me too. And that maybe it's going to help us somewhere in the future. I really hope it does. It would be nice to be chemical free, killing mites.
Yeah, I'd never heard about the hummingbird migration, so I'm very interested to see to watch that. I thought that's an interesting sort of side note.
Yeah, when I was flying with the airlines, we were at 35, 40,000 feet. You could watch the spring come north, and you could watch the winter go south, vice versa. And it was interesting. And one day I thought there's got to be a way to see when the spring is coming north. And my wife monitors hummingbirds and reports their position when they come in. So I went to that map, and there it was. And they report every day. Those people are very loyal, and it's really handy. It's a handy chart. You know it's coming when you see that. Question. Oh yeah, paper plates for candy boards. What I do, if you're going to make like a hard candy and pour it, I take the cheapest paper plates I can find and stack about 6 of them together and fill them up with that candy, and then let it cool, and then pull just one plate off, and I go along and slide those in under the inner cover. And of course I've got a shim on there, a spacer, and I slide it in candy down, and the bees will eat the candy that way. And once they start chewing on a paper plate, it's a good sign to me that they need more candy. And it works very well. You can use different sizes of paper plates, but the cheapest are the best.
And it's probably more the paper plates than the styrofoam ones, obviously.
Oh yeah, don't use the styrofoam. That stuff, bees will chew it, and it's bad for them. It's like the follower boards. Before I started coating the whole thing, I went in there one day, and there was just the foil facing on the insulation was just hanging from the top bar. There was no foam in between the two pieces of it, and there was a big pile of it on the bottom board. And that's bees. I think it's fun to get through that, or to see that. And I use silicone baking container. Yeah, that they work very well. The silicone does, and you can just throw the candy on there. Then the paper plate thing came about before I got into using silicone. And somebody said their candy is hard. That doesn't bother the bees. Put it over there, and usually the moisture and the heat that's condensing on there will soften enough that the bees can use it without any problem. And you can use the corrugated political signs, but what I like about the styrofoam is that it gives them an insulation factor of R3, and then the dead air is R6. So if you put your follower boards in the dead air on the north side, the bees are very well insulated from the cold wear. And I do like to put the corrugated. I used to use the corrugated political signs because I like to see some of those politicians get their efforts chopped up. That was fun.
And Amanda asked, what was with the hummingbird migration? Amanda, I think that was just a way of kind of monitoring spring arriving in your area.
Yeah. If you'll go online, just Google the Hummingbird Migration Map, and you'll get, there's 2 or 3 that do that. Of course, one's out west, and that's the not the ruby-throated hummingbird that we have around here. It's a different one. But you'll see that, and you'll see where they start. And if you click on the hummingbird in that area, it'll give you the date and time that it was spotted. And that's a good sign that spring is headed your way. And like I said, they have to feed as they fly. So if the blooms aren't there, they're not moving. And it's a good sign they're moving north when you see them.
Any other questions? I could certainly prompt a few, probably. So, John, at what temperature, as we get into, February, March, April time frame, what temperature, people are going to want to maybe start really kind of digging into their beehives, and what's the recommended temperature before you really get in and start pulling out frames and looking for brood and things like that?
I like to let the bees tell me that. If there's a lot of bees flying, then that's an indicator that it's probably okay for me to pull the cover. Now, if I do lift the cover to look in, I always do it on the downwind side. Being a pilot, you know what I'm talking about. I do it on the downwind side of the box. I don't want the box to be filled up with cold air real quick. But I lift it up and look, and if the bees are giving an indication that the cluster is moving around or even separated, then that's okay to start moving a frame or two, and move 1 or 2 frames out at a time. And if you get to the point where you see bees festooning together like they're in a cluster, then put it back together and close it back up. And you're going to be all right doing that. But it's difficult to say a certain temperature because, the sunlight makes a difference, the location of the colony. There's a lot of things going on, and the bees will tell you better than anything if they're flying and it's okay to come in there.
And Joe Patrick just put a link to the Hummingbird website in there. Joe, I knew that you'd come up with that.
That's great. Yeah, it's good. You'll get addicted to stuff like that. But that's what beekeeping's all about, and I appreciate the Zoom conference. I do like live conferences because if you do it right, you get a discussion going. You get a lot of different topics and everybody starts learning, and it's really exciting when that happens. But I'm glad somebody came up with Zoom and we can still get together, even all this bad stuff going on. And it's reassuring, to say the least.
Yeah, Jay Francis, I hope you were paying attention to that. That means John's going to come to Kansas for Fun Day sometime.
Well, he's got some good ones coming up there with Crispin and Jay Evans. Boy, they're great speakers. And by the way, in July, the Heartland Apicultural Society will be in Evansville, Indiana. If anybody wants to drive down to that, and we've got some great speakers there. It's at the University of Southern Indiana campus, and you can get a dorm room and stay the entire time, and it's not expensive at all. It's the little brother of EAS is what it is. That's what we call ourselves at HAS. But it's a good conference, and that one sounds great. Your Fun Day, man. I like that.
Yeah, we do another plug. I mean, sure, Becky and Jolie and Jay can plug it, but yeah, it's the first weekend of June every year. It's an all-day conference, outdoor, very similar to like the EAS conference. I mean, we'll get several hundred people in. We draw in some pretty big name people. We've had Randy Oliver and lots of good folks show up. So yeah, I'm pleased to see Jay Evans. He's with the USDARs out on the East Coast.
Yeah, he's a great speaker. I got to the last time we had HAS in Bowling Green, I got to eat lunch with him a couple of times, and he's the man when it comes to diet, dissecting the bees and doing the disease diagnoses and all that stuff. It's amazing how much that guy knows. They all are, and it's good to have them on our side. It really is.
Yeah. All right. Well, if anybody else doesn't have any more questions, we'll let John go, and I think we'll end the meeting for the evening.
Thank you again, Matt. Sure appreciate it.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.